Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mrs. Baker's Monster Paper Walkthrough. This is the Paper 4 edition of Module 5, and this is question 3. So, sulfur exists as a number of different isotopes. What is meant by the term isotopes? It's a 2-mark question, so I know I'm going to need 2 bullet points. The first mark I'm getting for saying isotopes are atoms of the same element with the same number of protons and electrons. Second mark, but different number of neutrons. 2 marks. A sulfide ion has the symbol shown. This is harping back to what we learned in the first modules, in module 3. So we've got 34 as the mass number. That tells us the number of protons plus neutrons. We've got 16 as the atomic number. That tells us just the number of protons. In an atom, it also tells us the number of electrons, but this isn't an atom. We know it's not an atom because it's got a 2 minus to charge. So how many neutrons are contained? So we need to do 34 minus 16. So that's 34 minus 16. That gives us 18. So how many neutrons? 34 minus 16 equals 18 neutrons. How is a sulfide ion, S2 minus, formed from a sulfur atom? Well, if you're a minus, you must have gained electrons because electrons are negatively charged. So, how is a sulfide ion formed? The sulfur atom gains 2 electrons to form a sulfide ion. So, which element forms an ion with a 2 plus charge that have the same number of electrons as an S minus ion? Well, we know that if we're looking for a 2 plus charge, we're looking for a metal. So we're going to look on our periodic table and we're going to say, well, when sulfur was an atom, the number of protons must have equaled the number of electrons. So it must have had 16 electrons to start. When it became a 2 minus, it must have had 18 electrons. So we're going to look at our periodic table. When we look at our periodic table, we see that calcium starts off with 20 electrons. If calcium gives 2 electrons away to form a 2 plus charge, it is also going to have 18 electrons. So which element forms the same number of electrons as a sulfide? It will be calcium. Question 3 continued. Sulfur dioxide reacts with aqueous sodium sulfite to produce a compound with the following composition by mass. So it's got 29.1% sodium, it's got 40.5% sulfur, and it's got 30.4% oxygen. We need to calculate the empirical formula. How do we do that? Well, we can break out another little table. We put in sodium, we put in sulfur, we put in oxygen. We know that we've got 29.1% of sodium, we've got 40.5% of sulfur, and we've got 30.4% of oxygen. Divide that by the relative molecular mass of one atom to get the number of moles. So sulfur is 32 and sodium is 23. So now we need to find our smallest number of moles, or we need to find out how many moles we've got of each. So let's do that. 29.1 divided by 23 gives us 2.165, 1.2, sorry, 1.2652. Try and keep as many decimal places as you possibly can here. Only an empirical formula at this stage because you don't want a rounding error. We are also going to say 40.5 divided by 32. That gives us 1.265625. And then we've got 30.4 divided by 16, and that gives us 1.9 exactly. So what's our smallest number of moles? Well, we've got 1.2652, 1.2652. So we know that these are in the same ratio, and they're both bigger than 1.9. So we're going to divide everything by 1.652. So divide by 1.2652, divide by 1.2652, and divide by 1.2652. What does that give us? That will give us 1 to pretty much 1 to 1.9 divide by 1.26652. That gives us 1.5. So we can't have 0.5 of an atom. So we need to do 1.5 times up until we get a whole number. So we just keep timesing it up and keep timesing it up until we get a whole number. Well, we know that 1.5 times by 2 will give us 3. So if we times 2, we get 3. Therefore, we must now times that by 2, and we must now times that by 2. So that gives us 2 and 2. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2. So our ratio is 2 to 2 to 3. My empirical formula will be Na2S2O3. And that is the correct answer.